Hello and welcome to our channel, Mistakes Were Made. This channel is created to document our progress with our debt reduction goals. Now that is credit card debt, it's personal loans, it's car payments, and of course the ultimate reducing our and eventually eliminating our mortgage. So right now the focus though is on the more commercial debt stuff. The mortgage is a little bit on the back burner. Now, if this is the first video of ours you've seen, welcome. Very glad to have you. I hope you find something interesting within what we're talking about. And if you would like to get a little bit of background, I really recommend watching our first video, which is our debt confession video. Kind of outlines, the financials we're starting with, or we were starting with, as well as how we kind of got into this position and some of the headwinds that we're dealing with in the very near future. If you've seen one of our other videos, there's not very many. This is only number 3 or 4. Again, welcome back. Very much appreciate you taking the time to check in on us and kind of seeing what our progress is since the last time. So speaking of previous videos, the last video kind of went over the structure that I was trying to create. I really felt that we needed something to help us organize the process of dealing with the inflow of money, the outflow of money, making sure that the debts get paid and all of that. So after watching some different videos, I didn't find one that felt like it fit 100%, but there were some things that I thought we could incorporate and make fit our situation. So we're basically doing kind of a modified paycheck method, and determined that seemed like the best option because his paychecks follow the more traditional every 2 weeks payment structure, and then my paychecks are twice a month on the 15th and the 30th or 31st, depending on the month. So that kind of really fit in well with the idea of figuring out when do our debts fall, in the first half of the month or in the second half of the month. Additionally, that really works well with our mortgage because we do pay every 2 weeks. So as a general rule, we'll have half of a mortgage payment at the first half of the month, and the second half of the mortgage payment falls in the second half of the month. So that seemed to be a good option for us. So with that in mind, I did want to, before we kind of get into how things have gone this first month, I did want to get into a little bit about how has this process or, these changes kind of affected our actions and our attitudes and things like that. Because I do feel like at least where the biggest attention seems to be on what are the dollar amounts of the debts and how quickly are they going down and things like that, that a lot of the behind the scenes work gets lost. So, for example, prior to any of this being a thing, I have always had kind of a need for a buffer in our checking account. I did not feel comfortable allowing the account to get below a certain amount. And then on top of that, I would still try and maintain a total in our account that increased that minimum by like another $1,000 or so. So I was just very paranoid about having overdrafts. And so even with the payments we would make to credit cards, after we had used them, or the spending that we would do, we would still maintain a certain amount of money in the checking account. And this process, eliminating a lot of those extra payments and stuff and things that we were spending money on kind of really highlighted the fact that we really didn't need to use the credit cards to the extent that we had. We had the money in the account. It was just easier to pull out a credit card with that false sense of longer time to pay on it and not having an immediate drop in the checking account of the money, that sort of fake feeling of you have more money than you actually do. So there were a lot of things that we could have just paid straightforward out of our account, but we used the credit cards anyway. And I know that there is a very vocal contingent who are adamantly 100% against credit cards. There is no good way to use them. And there are others who are similarly as passionate that says, no, if you use them properly, you can reap the benefits from them. You just have to be very on top of it and be wise in how you do it. That's not an argument I'm here to step into, but suffice to say, we utilize the credit cards in a destructive way, in a way that we really, really didn't need to, and could have, if not avoided, being in this position altogether, at least have been in a far less amount of debt than we currently are. And some of this was really brought to mind because we were starting this new process, I wanted to see if we could have kind of a clearer view of how much money we had that is available to pay our debts, and then do some calculations to determine, okay, is the amount that we have actually going to cover the budget that we have in place? Are we going to be over budget, so we have less money than we need? Are we going to be under budgeting, so we have a lot of extra? All of those things. And one of the pieces that was kind of in the way was I knew we have one of our 0% promos is going to expire at the end of February. And so I wanted to make sure we could pull the money that I have calculated we need to pay that off out of, the equation altogether. So I did those calculations, and lo and behold, because we haven't been spending the money like we had before, because we haven't been using our credit cards, and we have been just doing the minimum payments and things like that, because we have stuck to the budget that we need to stick to, we did have a large chunk of money in our checking account, plus my need for buffers, that we could transfer out and set aside for that specific payment. Now, that is not really visible when we're discussing, the credit card debt and things like that. The fact that our actions have made it so that we are retaining more of the money that we're bringing in, instead of it going to, foolish things or stuff we don't need necessarily, or just want to go and spend, and we're spending, not necessarily recklessly, but just spending without thought to some extent. That significant change in our spending habits helped create that buffer. So we were able to move that over and create a clean slate for the calculations for this new process. So now that's what we're going to look at right now to see, how have we done and or how are we doing, because we are still kind of in that first half of the month. The first half of the month, it'll be over on the 15th, and today is the 11th. So once we pulled out that money, we could then go and look and see what we had left. So we had his paycheck that came in, that was a total of $1,825. We had my paycheck that came in, which was a total of $1,910 for that last paycheck of October. And that last paycheck of October does pay for that first half of November. Not only that, but there was still additional funds in the checking account, even after that extra was removed, that came to a total of $4,100. So from there, on the first of the month, I was able to go and calculate, okay, for our cash envelopes, for this first half of the month period, how much money do we need to fund those? And pulled that money out, funded those envelopes. That total amount came to $910. And I'm not going to go into the actual envelopes or the items that create this dollar amount, this total, because we went over that a little bit in the last video. Instead, we'll just look at it kind of more big picture. We also had our credit cards, which total $575. The monthly costs, which are, you know, gas bill and car insurance, you know, those things that didn't fall within a cash envelope, which is $548, and then the first half of the mortgage, which is $840. That total comes to $2,873. So if we take that and minus it from $4,100, we end up with $1,227 that is unallocated. Now I'm going to pause here for a second, because when I look at that number, again, I just have to kick ourselves, because if we had had that epiphany, that realization of we have gone way down the wrong path and we need to make a change without having to be triggered by the fact that I'm going to be losing my job, you know, so the current income rates that we have now would still be going forward, but we are doing this process. The idea of, for a first half of the month, having $1,200 that we could have applied to our credit card debt would be amazing. Unfortunately, you know, that is not where we're at. And plus, unfortunately as well, you know, unexpected costs will affect this amount. And I say that because we did have an unbudgeted, unexpected cost that came through. Now, we have been funding a sinking fund. We have our emergency fund. I also created essentially a secondary savings thing called Unexpected. And those, you know, are in place to be able to, well, maybe not the emergency fund, but at least the other two are in place to kind of weather those unexpected costs. Well, I didn't want to use that money because we are just getting them established, and we do have this unallocated amount. I mean, it's pretty much 6 of one, half dozen of another, in, you know, however you want to look at it. It's all essentially money that we're not going to have available to use in the way we want to use it. But that's just how I'm organizing it. But unfortunately, we did have an unexpected cost in the shape of a speeding ticket. And obviously there is no time that's a good time for a speeding ticket, but this was particularly kind of painful because not only is there the cost of the speeding ticket, but when I was looking it up online to see kind of what kind of ramifications are we going to see from this, the consensus was you'll probably see an increase in your premiums of about 25%. For our state, tickets or moving violations tend to stay on your record for about 3 years. So, you know, we'll be dealing with the effects of that for a while. And not only that, but we had begun the process of trying to see if we could find a different insurance company to get better rates. I am expecting that whatever rates we might have been able to get prior to this, as we try to find a different company for coverage, they're going to be far, far worse than they would have been prior to this situation. Because again, I can't imagine that some new company is going to look and see that we haven't had a moving violation in, you know, billions of years. I know that's an exaggeration, but, and so go ahead and still give us a good rate as if we never had it in the first place. And it's an opportunity for them to make money, so they're going to take it. And, you know, it was stupid activities that ended up with us getting it, so it's not like it couldn't have been avoided. Anyway, it's happened. There are going to be probably some long-term effects of it happening, and we just have to figure out, what those are going to be and deal with them when they come up. So that then reduces the unallocated amount to $959. And I do realize that I cannot indulge in a multi-thousand-dollar buffer like I could before. But I don't feel comfortable not having any buffer at all. So as a compromise, I am allowing a $200 buffer. And this money's job is just to sit in the account. It's just sit there, look pretty, and make me feel like there's not going to be a problem with us overdrawing or something like that. It's just going to sit. Which then leaves us with $759, and of that, $750 is going to go into savings. That extra $9 just kind of pumps up the buffer just slightly. So at the end of the day, assuming nothing else happens for this first half of the month, November 1st through the 15th, we have now allocated or assigned a place for basically all the money that we have, and that's going to result in $750 going into our savings. So I did the same thing for the second half of the month as well, and probably the 16th, 17th, about the time that all of the final payments that need to be made, because some of our credit card payments don't come out until the 15th of November. Once those have come through and have been officially, they're no longer pending, they're actually in the account and had their effect, then we can see exactly how much money we truly do have in the account left over and verify that the $750 is what's going to be left to move over to the savings. And then we're starting essentially fresh again with the next pay period and the next bucket amount. So his paycheck has already come through, $1,561. Mine is slated to come through on the 15th. Oops, let me scooch this up a little bit. At the $1,910. Now, you may or may not realize or recognize that this $1,561 is less than what it was to get up to this $4,100 before, and that's because though he made some adjustments with his 401k, we were a little bit skeptical about the effect it had on his paycheck. It just seemed very outsized, but we utilized it and we made some changes to our budget to kind of accommodate that. But in the back of our minds, he had a thought that maybe there was a bonus that had been applied in there. And then when this paycheck came through, it kind of made it clear, yes, that $1,825 was actually this amount here plus a bonus on top of it. So we are using this now as kind of the status quo for his contribution. And then the $1,910, I am actually expecting to have a bonus that gets applied, but I'm not quite sure how much it will be, and especially how much it'll be after, taxes are considered. So we're just going to go with what my standard pay is now that we've received that raise of the $1,910. So you add those two together and we have $3,470 plus our $200 buffer. For the second half of the month, cash envelope totals are $650. Credit card is $450. The remaining of our costs, insurance, gas bill, electric, etc., $575. And then, of course, the second half of our mortgage is $840, which becomes a total of $2,515. Minus that from there, you come to $1,155. Now, again, this is all in the future. This is future days. No idea what might happen. Something unexpected could crop up. But yeah, if everything goes smoothly, goes to plan, we stay within our budget as we have it listed out, then we should have $1,155 left over We take that $200 buffer out of that total again. And so then we have $955, 950 of which would move over to savings, and then that $5 goes back into the buffer. So if we look at this, together, and if this ends up being completely accurate for the month of November, we're looking at a total of $1,700 that normally would be available to reduce our credit card debt. And again, this is based on our pay as of today. This is not forward looking as what my pay might be in the future, because I have absolutely no idea. That said, I have kind of extrapolated out this process for December, and I did it also for January, because still, while we are looking at November being basically, yes, in the books, we are definitely going to be here through the end of November. December is a little bit, it's less for sure, but still likely. January is a crapshoot. Not clear if anybody will be around in January. Not clear if some people will be around, but they'll be cut, so it's hard to say who. But I wanted to make sure I kind of did as best as I could calculations for each of those scenarios, because each of those different scenarios means there's a different amount of money that I've saved, or that we've saved, to help cushion the time period that I am unemployed. And obviously, the longer I continue to work, the more that savings goes up, the more buffer or cushion we have, which, that's all for the better. The goal, of course, is to get a job as quickly as we can, or as I can, but at the same time, there are requirements that I need to meet as far as financially. I created a couple of different budget totals, not, adjusting our budget itself, but just saying, okay, if our budget comes to X dollars, this is how much of that my paycheck needs to pay, because his paycheck is a known entity at this point. And so the remainder is what I need to make sure I'm making so that we can meet this budget. And so I made one that it is tight. There is no extra whatsoever to pay like extra on credit cards. It is the budget as is. And that is like the absolute minimum that I can make, and for us to be able to follow this. I created a total that allows for $300 extra. I did one that allows for $700 extra. And those are the three that I kind of put together and then did the calculations to say, okay, for this one, I need to make, X dollars per hour. For this one, I need to make Y dollars per hour. And for this one, for us to be able to do it, I need to be doing Z dollars per hour. I have not really looked into the idea of us keeping our budget as it is now, or our income as it is now, because I have been looking. I have put out some resumes and applications, haven't really gotten any responses back. But when I look at what is available, what fits my skills, my experience, and even if I step a little bit outside of that, with the idea that maybe I could grow into something, the dollar amount that is available, it does not match what I'm currently making. So at this point, I have basically come to the realization and understanding that I will not be able to replace my current wage 100%. Now, for the different scenarios that I put together, the per hour that I would need to make, or the salary I would need to make, there are some jobs that fall within those various things. Obviously, the higher you go, the fewer that are available. But again, there's no guarantee that I would get any of those jobs. So the more money we can save, the more time we have for me to try and achieve a job that is going to bring in a decent amount of money in comparison to what our budget is. But also I am very aware and very clear that if that doesn't happen quickly, then we'll have to go with that more stringent and more painful budget process, which means the debt reduction process is going to take an incredible, a long amount of time. But also, we'll probably have to look at our budget and see, okay, where are there other cuts? Where are there things that we can continue to look to reduce and things like that? Some of that stuff we're not looking at right now because our focus is save money, save money, save money. Once we know what amount we're working with as far as my income plus his income, that will help us more, solidify any changes we need to make in our current budget at that point. So that's kind of what we're working with and where we're at. So now why don't we go and take a look at, what changes we do have for the first half of November. And you can see we don't have a lot of stuff coming out on various days. It's basically things that are in our budget, as well as, credit card payments, wages coming in. We do have a big one right here, and we'll go over that a little bit. But last week and this week, Amazon amount is still the same. This one is one that's a second half account. Citibank or Citi, that did change because we did have a payment that came out, and so it dropped by $100. Discover, this one had a very, very small amount of a reduction because we did have some remaining points or rewards, and so we changed that into a credit onto the account. The actual payment that's going to come out is the second half, so this should change a little bit later in the month. Mom, that didn't change between last week and this week, but this did change between the week prior in this one, because at the beginning of the month we fund Mom's envelope, so this came down $250. And then last but not least is the big change, and this is the one that I talked about at the beginning of this video. Essentially, the calculation that I made was that we needed $2,800 to close out the 0% promo that was going to expire in February of this year. Now, previously, my thought was I'll put that into savings, and then in December, we'll go ahead and make that payment. And the only reason why I came up with that timeline was February is when it would be due to be paid. I wanted to make the payment a couple of months ahead of time, just in case I made some kind of calculation error, so that it could go and pay down, the statement could cycle, and then I could look and verify, has that truly been paid off? If there's even like a penny missing, I want to know so that we can go ahead and make that payment, and then it can cycle one more month, so in January, and we can verify 100% zero balance for that particular promo, so there's no opportunity for the bank to then come back and say, oh, guess what, you didn't pay this in full, you missed $4 or whatever, so now all of that deferred interest is going to be applied. So that was the thought process. But then, of course, I was like, well, is there any real reason we need to wait until December? I couldn't think of a good reason. The only thing that came to mind was it's sitting in our savings account, so maybe we might earn some interest on it, but that didn't make any sense to me. Better to just get it out of the way and pay it off. And obviously we couldn't use the money anyway for anything else because this money needed to be allocated to this promo amount. So $2,800 came off of $11,995, which for this week brought it down to $9,195. So very nice to see a significant reduction, since that's not something I'm anticipating we're going to see for a little while we're in this savings mode. And then depending on how the job situation goes, how much we'll be able to start doing some reductions, we'll see. That's a future calculation and figuring that will come later. But it is nice to see some progress, especially since most of the progress that we have been making has been on how our attitude towards money, how we're spending, how we're saving, and things like that, more hidden than visible. So that's where we're at. The next video will probably verify, exactly how the last part of this month went, or this half went, how our progress through the second half of the month is going. I tend to do these about every 2 weeks because honestly, there's not a lot going on. It's us just living our lives and working and not spending. And then as things go, we can do a recap. It doesn't feel like there's enough going on for us to do one every week. And I know the idea is if you're looking to monetize your channel, the more videos you do, the more likely that is to happen and the faster it can happen. But really, I didn't start this channel as a opportunity to make money. It really is for us to document what we're doing, to build in some additional accountability, to allow for folks to, provide some information or their experiences, and for us to be able to learn from those. And, I do read every single comment. And even if I don't agree with a person's assessment of the situation, what they think we should be doing, whether they feel we're doing enough or whatever, I still appreciate that perspective. We may not incorporate what has been put out there, or because we know what our situation is, some of the comments just kind of slide off the duck's back. But at the same time, I do appreciate that people take the time to give us that information. And there have been things that people have suggested or put out there that we have been able to incorporate or use for our particular situation. And so, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to make this channel. Additionally, if somebody else is in a similar situation where it's the pending job loss, or you've got all this debt and you don't know how the heck you could possibly have done this to yourself because it, in retrospect, it's just so stupid, then there's somebody that you can commiserate with, and happy to be, that person. And finally, as we have some successes, I'm hoping that other people who are in the same situation or getting to that point see that, and that can be an encouragement for them. Now, I'm not saying that if we do get to a point where this is can be monetized, we wouldn't do it, but that's not the point of this. So we're not really taking any specific actions to make that happen more rapidly or anything like that. That's also another reason why I'm not sharing my Etsy. I just don't feel comfortable with that. And there may be people out there who are like, you are losing a huge opportunity to advertise and potentially make money, and you're in debt, so you should be taking any opportunity to do that. And I certainly understand that perspective, but I just don't feel comfortable. So at least at this point, that is not the route we are going to take. And that's kind of is what it is. All right. So yeah, this ended up being another long video. So we touched on a fair amount of stuff, and hopefully it was interesting. If you have any suggestions, ideas, or just want to say hi, please drop them into the comments. And I am trying to make sure to acknowledge or reply in some way to every single one of them. All right. Well, I guess I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.